Welcome to They Are Waiting for Us from Forbes Books, the podcast that explores how education can transform lives and communities, featuring conversations with change agents who are making a difference in education, from parents and advocates to teachers and leaders. Here's Dr. Lisa Andrew.
My guest today is a leader who has dedicated her life to transforming education and empowering learners of all ages and backgrounds. Katrina Stevens is the president and CEO of the Tech Interactive, and she has a wealth of experience in the fields of learning science, educational technology, and policy. Katrina has worked at the highest levels of government, philanthropy, and academia, and has been a champion for equity, inclusion, and diversity in STEM. She is an educator at heart, having taught in classrooms from Baltimore to Bermuda. She is passionate about creating inspirational and impactful learning experiences for young people around the world. Katrina, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm happy to be here.
So, looking over your LinkedIn and all the other things on the internet about you, you have a very diverse resume, not a typical roadmap to the top seat of CEO. So how would you describe your journey to the CEO position?
Sure, it's a great question. Yeah, it wasn't an intentional journey. I started teaching, I loved teaching, and I thought I would never leave the classroom. But as I went to kind of each stage, I started taking different seats. So then I got asked to be, to teach other teachers, and then I got asked to be a principal, and I got asked to, and so at each stage, I kept seeing things that I thought could be done better. And so I would move to that seat. And so I talk about actually having moved to many, many, many seats in the ecosystem. When technology first started coming around, what I noticed is that a lot of the digital tools that we were getting, it was clear they hadn't talked to educators because of just a little tweak, and we would have gotten something that worked. And so that led me into really starting to get onto the other side of how do tools get developed and how do we get educator voice. And then I realized, we actually need to get researchers in that, and then we need to get policy people in that. So I kept trying to, figure out those parts of the system to see if I could figure out how it all actually connect and add up.
What an idea to actually ask the people who are using the technology what they think they need in the technology, right? It's that I read the book for the Starbucks founder, and it's something about a broom, like the person who's going to use the broom needs to choose the broom. The floor needs to get swept, and a broom needs to be a part of this equation, but letting the person select what it is so they have some buy-in and ownership and understanding of it. The same in what I hear you saying, the same in education. So what is it that you see on the ground, but also bringing in that research base? Because as you're in the field and you're being the tactician, it's like what research can also bolster your day-to-day activity and make it even more, the ability to leverage it and more impactful. Right. So it sounds like an aspirational reason to move from seat to seat so that the person on the ground could be more impactful.
I would go even further than just the person who is using the tool needs to pick the tool. I would go and say that the person who's going to ultimately use that tool needs to be part of developing it. We talk about co-development. When I was at Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, most of the grants that we did there were really around how are you co-designing? And it's a delicate balance because if you co-designed every single step, then you would never actually get anything into the field. And teachers don't have a lot of time. The one resource is they don't have extra of is time. And so being able to find that right balance between when do you get that educator voice part of the development, and then when do you kind of bring in the research component? For me, that one of the important things that often got left out and is starting to come into this is looking at the context. So how do we know what works for whom and in what context? Because a particular tool could actually work really, really well in one particular context. For example, if a tool is designed for project-based learning and the school has a project-based learning philosophy, that tool's going to work really well. But if a school has never even looked to project-based learning, it's going to fail without a significant amount of professional development. So that's one of the pieces that often gets left out of particularly formal research. It's done in a way like a broad sweeping generalization of this works, it doesn't work. And for me, it's like adding that piece. Well, when does it work and for whom does it work? And the best place to develop tools that get there is actually design with them.
Yeah. Well, as a teacher, I thank you for thinking about co-design, and I thank you for wanting the tools to be MIDI and for the tools to be applied in context. We need more of that going on today as well. So as the CEO, what are some of your goals or priorities for the Tech Interactive?
Always a good question. My goals are always ambitious. So our mission at the Tech is to inspire the innovator in everyone. And as part of that is we're really working to be able to create problem solvers locally, nationally, and globally. But really, my ultimate goal is to create a world where all students, regardless of what school they went to, regardless of their family background, have access to life-changing experiences. And we're particularly focused on life-changing experiences that might help them think about the potential in STEM fields. And we're in a unique spot here in Silicon Valley. So how do I get that innovation and that access? How do I get that to more kids across the country and the world? And then my secret goal, if I can really, as a community, if we can help young people who are coming from really diverse backgrounds enter into these emerging tech fields, we can actually change what gets designed. And then to make sure that the next breakthrough technologies benefit everyone, particularly those folks who most need those changes.
Talking about context matters and the ability to bring in a lived experience into that context in when you're developing and innovating. So you kind of touched on what and we're going to talk more about students of Silicon Valley being the workforce of Silicon Valley later on in the podcast. But I want to kind of go back to something that you said about the mission. So you said the Tech Interactive's mission is to inspire the innovator in everyone. So what have you done in the last month to inspire the innovator in you?
One of the experiences, so I just got back from Kenya.
Oh, okay.
And so we launched our tech challenge in Kenya. And so the first time we were really doing that at the scale that we were. And for me, going and seeing it was in Nakuru. I had over 750 students participate. And they inspired me. Just watching the innovation. And for kids there, most of them had never worked even in a small group, ever in their lives. If they do anything and as a team, it's 100. So it's, sports are 100 kids doing something. A play production is 100 kids. So they even just had to learn how to work together. And over again, hearing kids say the same things we want kids to say here, and we hear kids say together, is I didn't know I could do that. So I didn't know. And teachers saying, I didn't know my students could do that. And just that shift in thinking about I could solve a problem myself. For me, that I left completely inspired by that.
And that is the gold star definition of access and opportunity, right? It's when you provide that access and you provide that opportunity, it happens for the students, it happens for the kids, it happens for the adults. It's creating that space for them to be able to do that. So what an inspiration to carry you for the next few months through the fall.
Indeed.
So as you know, being here in the heart of Silicon Valley, most tech companies are focusing on building a diverse pipeline of STEM workers. And with over 250,000 visitors a year to the Tech Interactive, you have a huge opportunity to showcase a diverse workforce along science, technology, engineering, and mathematics as they go through the museum. So what are some of the strategies or actions that you take to promote diversity in your workforce?
It's a great question. It's something we were heavily focused on. And kind of pre-COVID, we were having about 500,000 people come through.
Wow.
And 100,000 of them every year. And our field trip numbers are back up. So we have 100,000 students who come to us on a field trip. And I really see that being the moment where young people are, sometimes the first field trip ever, the first time they've ever in a science center. So we're very intentional about all throughout all of our materials, including when you come into the tech, making sure that kids are able to see people that look like them. One of my favorites is a scientist that we've highlight in our sustainable exhibit called Solve for Earth. And Robin was a young man who grew up in Richmond, had a lot of struggles with violence and not very high graduation rates. And he discovered that an engineer made a bridge. He tried school a couple of times, tried university. Then he went to community college, and then he's now at Berkeley. And one of the things he's working on is really how to make more environmentally sound resources for his community. But he looks and talks like a lot of our kids. And so I see their faces light up. And the same thing when we have Tech for Global Good, where we highlight people around the world who are using technology in some way to make the world a better place. We're very intentional about who we choose and what stories that we choose. We want to make sure that kids leave the tech feeling like there are people that actually solve these problems. So not some magic tool, but that somebody created that tool, and why couldn't that person creating the next tool be them? That's entirely how we design and think about each of our exhibits, and also any of our learning resources.
Yeah, that's great. That's wonderful. Well, I know one way that you've promoted diversity is partnering with my organization, the Silicon Valley Education Foundation, in hosting our Women in STEM event. So thank you for that. And that event has grown, and we get a whole diverse group that come out and they get to experience the Tech Interactive. So thank you for that wonderful partnership.
We believe at the Tech that it is not one organization. It is the community of organizations that are going to help our kids together. So we all should be helping each other.
Yeah, exactly. There's enough work for all of us. So another aspect of our organization's alignment is our goal in providing high-quality STEM access and opportunity for students of under-resourced areas in Silicon Valley. And you've been speaking to this prior in some of the other questions. As you know, students are waiting for us to show up with engaging real-world experiences and lessons. So how does the Tech Interactive work toward this goal? And you talked a little bit about the field trips, but a little bit more specifics about who gets to come on a field trip, how are they selected, and what is their experience once they get there?
And we do this, we make sure that we have access for people who might not think about themselves as coming to the Tech, or might not have the kinds of resources to get there. And we have two programs. So one, I'll talk about the field trips in a second, but we also have a program called Museums for All. And that is intentionally around anyone who would not otherwise be able to come is allowed to come for free. So we have a whole program around that. And we partner with community organizations because we found that that's the best way to reach people rather than just kind of advertising. Folks want to come with the rest of their community. And so we often will have a field trip of adults with their kids coming to the Tech. On field trips, we make sure that any child who wants to come, any teacher who wants to bring their students is able to. That includes, sometimes schools say we can't afford transportation. And so we have small subsidy where we can actually subsidize transportation.
Wonderful.
We also have Title I field trips that are just free. And so that's one way we make sure that there's complete access. Sometimes actually schools that aren't Title I, and you know this, Lisa, but aren't high income areas, get caught in the middle because they don't have extra Title I funds. And so we're also careful to make sure that those schools have complete access. Like I said, we have about 100,000 students coming through, and we intend to be able to increase the number of kids that come here.
And so once they arrive there, what are some of the things that they do? What are some of their experiences?
Yeah. So once the kids get there, we have a whole organization around how kids stay with their teachers and make sure that we are accounting for all of our students. They have a variety of things that they get to do. So they can work through the galleries themselves, where they're just exploring with their chaperone and trying some of the different activities. Everything from sustainability to bioengineering to body worlds. We have an exhibit where you can actually explore the human body. So multiple kinds, where they can build social robots, where they can become engineers in an activity where they can create basically a trebuchet or something or other kinds of device. But they can also sign up for labs. And that's one of the places we feel like kids get the most impact, and we're certainly able to measure the impact the most there. We have 45-minute labs, and we have 90-minute labs. And so behind all the exhibits are actually classrooms that people don't know exist there. And that's where we, again, intentionally design this so that as teachers are watching or parent chaperones are watching, they also leave with an idea like, oh, I didn't know my kids could do that. That's one of the most frequent thing we hear from our teachers. So we're intentionally making sure that it's changing things, not just for that day, but for after that day. And then we have an IMAX theater. It is the only dome theater west of the Mississippi. And so we have a range of educational films, and teachers can either choose to go to the one that we're showcasing right then, or we have a whole library of films if there's another film that works better with the curriculum that where they are in their school. So a whole range of activities that kids get to choose from.
That's excellent. So if I was a typical 10-year-old, if there is such a thing, what is the exhibit that just like every kid is just drawn to and just has to experience, that you just see them always clustered there, like this is it?
Yes. So we have a couple of those where they're the must do. One of those is part of our Solve for Earth, which is our newest exhibit we opened when we reopened after coming out of COVID. All about climate change and sustainability. And it's really about choices. And we make sure it's not doom and gloom. It's really around what kinds of things can an individual do, what can a community do together in order to make a more sustainable community. And there's what we call the connections wall. So this huge, enormous wall, 60 square feet. You come up and it's completely interactive. So there's dials where you move, and all of the on the screens will change based on that dial. So you can change up how much building density you want to have, whether you're recycling or not recycling. And the wall changes. And in fact, even the floor, when you're recycling, the whales come back and the dolphins come back, so they're underneath you. And I'll see kids in there just, playing with that and seeing all the little adjustments. We have lots of little Easter eggs in there. And it's like you wave, the trees will wave back to you. So that's one that I see kids playing, spending quite a bit of time.
I have to tell you, I am a 50-plus kid, and I stayed at that exhibit for a half an hour. That wall, that area is amazing and so
really beautiful.
Understandable. Yes. And so here you go. You want to be an innovator of the future, an innovator for right now, looking at climate change. It's on the news. People are calling for national curriculum around climate change. So right on time, something real world, something very hands-on for a student to latch onto and know that they can also become a scientist or a mathematician or engineer or use technology around that issue. So just a plug for that wall.
After that wall, when you come into the exhibit, we have something called Sustainable Cities. And so it's 6 cities in the Bay Area. And it's like an in-depth version of that wall where kids get to become city planners and they make all kinds of decisions. And you actually see it play out on the exhibit itself. So if you want a higher building density, the buildings start rising. And it shows how both you can make your own city more sustainable, but also the impact that has on the whole Bay Area. And we have a popular lab, actually, that classrooms will do there as well. Social robots is one where young people, or actually people of all ages, will come. And it's a really simple way of being able to understand how basic coding works. You plug in a cube and that makes a light go on. And kids will get to play. And things don't always work, which is actually what we want them to know. That it's going to fail a few times, then you have to just kind of keep playing at it. That's what engineering is about. It's about trying things. It's about iteration. And so sometimes kids will spend the whole afternoon in there making this elaborate robot, and allowing, making it do things that they want it to do. We challenge them with some tasks, but oftentimes kids just actually create their own tasks for what they want their robots to do.
That's super cool. One of the things we're working on here is a couple of different pathways around computer science. About 5 years ago, one of our board members brought to our attention that the computer science field is just so broad and not everyone needs a 4-year degree.
Yes.
You can a 4-year degree, a 2-year degree, or tech certification. There's so many jobs in Silicon Valley around computer science, and it allows multiple entry points. So part of our work is ensuring that students beginning junior year, senior year can see the multiple doors. Doesn't mean you're going to end at a tech certification, but something you can sink your teeth into, get working maybe while you pursue or get in touch. So I think I'm super excited to hear that that's one of the things that they enjoy doing there is around that robotics and coding and to see immediately what they can do. So it's great. Okay, so a driving force for my day-to-day work is the belief that the students in all Silicon Valley neighborhoods, and I think you mentioned Title I schools or some of the schools that don't receive Title I. And for listeners out there, Title I is federal funding for school districts that have a certain percentage of kids that are considered socioeconomically disadvantaged or on the free and reduced lunch program. So those neighborhoods I believe they can be the workforce of Silicon Valley. We just talked about how computer science pathways can give them access to that immediately because we don't know a lot of them need to work. So what are some of the skills or competencies you think are essential for students to become the workforce of Silicon Valley?
Well, and one of the things that's important now is because as our kids are coming out, we have no idea what careers they'll even have 10 years from now. So that's a piece of how we need to make sure that kids learn. So part of it is just learning how to learn, and for us in particular, this idea of problem solving. that kind of mindset of how do you attend something? How do you iterate on that? How do you continue to keep going back, that perseverance that young people need? So some of these are just mindsets that folks need to have to be successful to go into the tech industry. And then there are actual skills that they need. For example, we spend a lot of time thinking about computational thinking, which is sort of the precursor to coding, but it's also the precursor to data science or to other kinds of avenues. So just understanding, and particularly as we're looking at AI, understanding that idea of like pattern recognition and how does that influence, and how do you use that actually to create the technology for the next generation. We spend a lot of time really also on like communication and collaboration. Like how do you work with one another? How do you, if you disagree, it's one of my favorite questions when we ask kids who participate in the tech challenge, is how did you handle, did you always agree on that solution? And it's like, of course they didn't. Like we had to learn how to listen to each other and then decide and figure out which one to go. If that didn't work, then we would go to the second choice. Those are real skills that you need in the workplace. And so those are skills that we are, all of our activities are designed to create.
Yeah, agreed. I need those in my nonprofit. Perhaps you do too. How do we deal with productive conflict? How do we create cascading communication? Working in that small group, working individually, working with a larger group, all of those things, problem solving. So it sounds like those are kind of skills that if we work on in the education community, they're just broad and far reaching. Then getting this specific skill that's needed. It's almost like the will to be a worker and the emotional intelligence to be a worker, and then the skill to that specific job, in the field is what to focus on. Yeah. Good. Well, that sounds like a great place to stop. But coming up in the second part of my conversation with Katrina Stevens, the president and CEO of the Tech Interactive, Katrina talks about the impact of bringing broadband connectivity to everyone, including Native American communities.
When we brought technology and that broadband access to a reservation, which is often isolated from the rest of the world, it can be transformative for a family and it can be transformative for an entire community.
This has been They Are Waiting for Us. If you want to learn how to create economic opportunity through equal access to quality education and create an extraordinary learning environment focused on everyone realizing their full potential, go to drlisaandrew.com. They Are Waiting for Us is a production of Forbes Books.